my name is Stacey. I'm the communications manager at the PYA. I've put together the last couple of webinars that we've covered on a range of topics during the coronavirus pandemic. And today I think we really want to just share an update on the regulations in the different regions. And that's why we've obviously got a lot of our regional agents on the webinar with us. But I think in addition, I think what we're seeing is definitely an active return to yachting at the moment. So a lot more boats are starting to go into the water. A lot of countries have opened up for guests and so tourists and obviously crew coming in and out. So, you know, each of our agents are going to be giving us a bit of an update on that. But just to give you a quick overview of the PYA. So before I jump into our schedule, the PYA, we've been around since 1991, so almost 30 years now. The PYA is a not-for-profit organization run by a range of existing crew and ex-crew. And we have a wide range of counselors which help crew with a lot of issues. So this includes contractual issues, issues on their certification, guidance on training, and very importantly, we're able to verify a sea service with our service record book. So we've got a sea service verification team who verifies sea service, and that's done in conjunction with the MCA. So that's sort of the PYA in a nutshell. Just to let everyone know before we start today, we are offering crew a 20% discount on our membership. So that, you know, obviously at the moment, it's been a very late start to the season. A lot of crew haven't been able to clock in as many hours as they normally would in previous years. So we're offering this special discount to help crew who still need to get their sea service verified and their certification done. So that's just the PYA in a nutshell. And I'll move on to our schedule and then I'll introduce all of our panelists fully. So obviously I've just done our welcome and we're just going over 5:05 here. So we'll move on very quickly. So from BWA Yachting, we've got Jan Pratt, who's the sales manager. And Jan's really going to just give us an overview of the Mediterranean in general. So BWA deal with a lot of different regions. So Jan's got a really good idea of what's happening in a sort of broad sense in the Mediterranean. In addition to that, Jan will fill us in with a few gaps with countries like Spain, Croatia, Montenegro, Albania, and Turkey. So he'll give us a little bit of an update on those countries. And then specifically, Lorenzo Shakera, he's managing director of Monaco and France. So Lorenzo is going to give us an update specifically on the regulations and any updates for the yachting industry in Monaco and France. And then we'll move on to Rosemary from A1 Yachting in Greece. So it's great to have you on today, Rosemary, and we're really eager to hear what, you know, what the updates are in Greece. I know a lot's been changing, so it will be really great to get a bit of an update from you. And then all the way from Malta, we've got John Ross. So John is also going to be giving us an update on Malta. So that will be great. I know Malta was one of the countries during the coronavirus lockdown that was still allowing boats in and out. Is that correct?
We've just started allowing arrivals from the beginning of this month.
Okay. So it was fairly soon on. Okay. So yeah, John's going to give us the full update on Malta. And then from Italy, we should have Ida De Felice. I don't know if Ida has joined us today, but she might join us during the course of the webinar. So hopefully we'll get an update from her on what's happening in Italy. And then lastly, what we'll be doing is I just want to encourage all the attendees to submit your questions in the webinar chat. We've got some members of our PYA team who've actually joined in as attendees. So they'll help respond to some of these questions where they can. Obviously, panelists, feel free to respond directly to questions in the chat. But at the end, I will review some of these questions that maybe haven't been answered. And then we'll just address those before closing. So what I'll do is I'll stop sharing my screen and just hand over to Jan, who will give us a sort of introduction as to sort of what's happening as a whole in the Mediterranean.
Yeah, thanks, Stacey. I'm going to also focus specifically, as you mentioned, on Spain, Croatia, Montenegro, Albania, and Turkey, and also I forgot to tell you before on Djibouti as well.
Brilliant.
Well, as usual, I just want to remind everybody that what I'm going to tell you is also based on the latest regulation we have as we speak. So a lot of things might change very quickly. So anything has to always be double checked with your local contacts before you take any decision. And also it's very important that everybody always keep in mind that every yacht crew member and guest are unique cases. So if you have specific question, we like to treat it case by case so we avoid any misunderstanding. So this is just a general overview so you all have an idea of what's going on in the country I just mentioned. So for Gibraltar, no major change since the last webinar. The ports remain fully open for all vessels. All operation can continue to be arranged. Off-port limit calls are all allowed. There is no restriction for yachts who's coming as far as they feel no to the coronavirus health local declarations. If they feel yes, there will be some special condition to be put in place. I'm not going to go into details, but I wish for all of you that nobody has to feel yes to any of these questions. The airport is opened. For crew movement, the government of Gibraltar allows crew change to take place. Hotels are open, rooms can be arranged for both crew joining and leaving the vessel. Guests from most of the nationalities are allowed to join the yacht upon certain conditions. And there is no quarantine or mandatory test required for people arriving in Gibraltar. Then for Spain, so all ports in the country are open, such as the shipyards. Yachts can be welcome only if they have a confirmed bookings in a marina, either if they come from outside Spain or inside Spain. Once in Spain, there is no legal compulsory quarantine if you have no declared case of coronavirus. There is a pre-arrival protocol that is still stricter than before, and the authorities require some additional documents like the Maritime Health Declaration and the ship's sanitation certificate if you are commercial. So the same thing as last time we were at the webinar, nothing changed on that level. No problem still to get transit visa for crew to be stamped in, to be stamped out. There is no limitation on that side, just that keep in mind that there is a bit more of administrative requests from the authorities to be put in place, but nothing too complicated. Most of Spain has entered phase 3 of the de-escalation since last Monday. From the 21st of June, travelers arriving from EU states and Schengen area countries will no longer be required to stay in quarantine, except for travelers coming from Portugal. From the 1st of July, travelers from outside of EU and the Schengen free travel area will be permitted to enter Spain, taking into consideration any reciprocal agreement on travel and the epidemiological situation of the country of origin. So hopefully we look forward to be back to almost normality from the 1st of July in Spain. For Croatia, well, as you know, Croatia is back into business since a few weeks now. So most of the COVID restrictions are suspended in the country, and all yachts are allowed to enter the country, except if you are a cruise ship with more than 40 passengers on board. Quarantine is not required upon arrival to Croatia, neither for crew nor for guests, regardless where the yacht is coming from and regardless the people's nationalities. All foreign nationals who are traveling to Croatia are not required to do quarantine nor self-isolation. COVID tests are not required. Everyone traveling to Croatia only suggests to follow recommendation given by the Croatian Institute of Public of Health. It's only recommendation, so it's not regulation. So then after everybody is volunteered to follow this recommendation or not. Currently, only Kaftat, Dubrovnik, Split, Šibenik, Rijeka, and Pula are open for immigration and clearance formalities. Poreč has recently reopened for out-border clearance control only, but under condition that clearance must be announced 48 hours in advance. But even if clearance is limited to the port I've just mentioned, you can still arrange a berth in any marinas of your choice in the country. International airports are operating, but there is only 2 airports with direct commercial international flights, which are Zagreb and Split. Then after, all the other airports are connected with local flights. Private planes are able to land of any of the international Croatian airports. Guests who are flying to join a pleasure yacht in Croatia, as well as additional crew members, must present an invitation letter. So it's very important that you get this letter issued in advance by your yacht agents. Otherwise, they won't be granted entrance in the country. Embarkation of guests in Croatian port are also allowed, and no additional documents are needed for traveling except the usual traditional travel documents and this invitation letter from the agent. So for Montenegro, Montenegro is a tricky one because our colleague there mentioned that maybe from tomorrow there will be some change in the rules. So what I'm going to tell you now is valid today, but if you are planning to go to Montenegro, it's better that you get in touch with us and we'll update you tomorrow. Also, the overall regulation in Montenegro is quite complex, so it's very complicated to understand every rules. I'm going to just give you the main line. So the idea is that most of the ports and marina are open. Since 1st of July, the authorities have issued a white list, that's how they call it, which include all the countries that have a rate of active coronavirus case that is less than 25 per 100,000 inhabitants. This list is updated weekly or even more if there is some need. I know, for instance, that it has been updated today with an additional country that has been removed. Quarantine is not required, and standard clearance procedure is conducted for yachts that are coming from countries that are only on this white list and carrying crew and passengers that are holders of passport of countries from this white list, and confirming that in the 14 days prior to arrival, these people were not in any of the country of this white list. So you see, you have to follow many rules to be able not to be in quarantine when you get in Montenegro. 14 days quarantine is compulsory for yachts coming from countries that are not part of this white list, and if you carry crew that are holders of passport that are not part of this white list. Before boats come, yachts must send requests for permission of arrival to the local authorities to be granted to get in. If quarantine yachts required to depart Montenegro prior to the full quarantine is over, it's possible, but you still need also the permission of the same authority. Private flights to Montenegro are allowed with planes of maximum 10 passengers capacity, regardless of the crew and passenger nationality, and regardless from which country the plane is arriving, as long as all relevant permits from entry in Montenegro airspace and landing at Montenegro airport are obtained in advance. All arriving people, crew and passenger must have a valid PCR test, not older than 48 hours. Test must be conducted by the authorized medical institution and presented upon arrival. And if you just want to go to Montenegro, the duty-free fuel, it's allowed, and you can just go and do the fuel and leave just right after without any specific restrictions. Now I'm going to finish with Albania and Turkey. It's much easier. So Albania yachts can enter in the country and are allowed to stay at anchor and on dock without time limitation. Before it was yachts were able to come only for bunker and provision with immediate departure. Now you can stay as long as you want. However, yachts can come only with crew, and the crew has to stay on board all the time of the stay in Albania. Crew movement can be arranged upon certain condition, and the country, our agents of the country are expecting maritime borders to be reopened and crew and guest movements to be allowed from the 1st of July. And for Turkey, so good news for Turkey, because the Turkish government has announced last week that they reopen their border for foreign nationals without any quarantine or self-isolation requirements. So tourist travelers do not need any specific health documentation to enter or to leave Turkey. Upon arrival, the official will take travelers' temperatures at the maritime ports, and travelers with high temperatures and from country with a high risk might be subject to pass a PCR test. So that's the idea for this country.
Great. So is that a sort of general update? Jan, do you have any other updates that you want to share?
I checked for this specific country. There is no special rules that our agent for this year that our agent have shared. All the regulation and everything is so much linked to the coronavirus that's the main focus as we speak. To be honest, for the other country where we have there is other attendees that's going to speak, I wanted to let them the opportunity to expose the regulation of the country they're going to expose.
Thank you. And I think, yeah, I mean, that's an important point to just stress before we go on, is I think as much as we want to move our webinars into the direction of sort of post-coronavirus, where there's general updates on, ports and cruising and anchorages, I think it's based on your update, Jan, I think we can see that there's so much still changing in relation to coronavirus. So I think that's probably what we're going to see a lot of today, is a lot of those changing regulations. So thank you for sharing that with us. What I will do is I'll move on quickly to your colleague, Lorenzo. Lorenzo, could you give us a bit more of an in-depth update on specifically what's happening in France and in Monaco for the industry, and obviously those who want to come and enjoy some of their summer holidays on a yacht in France and in Monaco?
Of course. Good evening, everybody. As Jan said correctly, the information I'm providing are just valid for today in this precise moment, because everything is changing very quickly. So Jan's recommendation is good to keep consulting your agent to case by case, because it's the best way to have correct information. Starting from Monaco, in Monaco the situation is much better now. The port and anchorages area are open. The big difference Monaco is doing is between boat who's coming from Schengen area and boat coming from extra Schengen area, rather than passengers. Boats coming from Schengen area are welcome in Monaco. They don't have to make any quarantine. They have to issue a DMS, Déclaration Maritime de Santé, Maritime Declaration of Health, 48 hours absolutely before arrival. And the police is very strict on that. And once they get in Monaco, they're absolutely free to move on Monegasque territory without any restriction. For boats coming from extra Schengen, the procedure is a bit tougher, I would say. It's a bit more tough. The boat is automatically put under quarantine once they get in Monaco, once they arrive in Monaco. Everybody on board, which means crew and guests, are required to do a COVID test, a swab test actually, and everybody has to stay on board until they get the results from the test. I just want to underline, because we had one case like that. The police is very, very straight on this. They control the boat 24/7, literally, also by cameras. So it's you're relegated on board. Once we get the results, if everybody is negative, the boat is the quarantine is lifted by the supervisor COVID, the maritime authorities, let's say. And pretty much for anchorages area, again, it's all free. Boats can anchor off anywhere in Monegasque water, respecting the Posidonia. In this respect, I would suggest everybody to download an application for Android and iOS, which is called Donia, D-O-N-I-A. This application gives you all the instruction on where the Posidonia is, where you can anchor and you cannot anchor. Of course, for boats greater than 80 meters, it must be asked the authorization to semaphore through VHF. Again, I recommend to call your agent before to make sure that all the authorities are informed in due course, I would say. And for Monaco, for navigation, is pretty much this. France is again, also France, navigation in France is open, and the ports are open as well as anchorages area. Again, the big difference is between boats arriving from Schengen and boats arriving from extra Schengen ports. Boats arriving from Schengen ports are due to communicate their arrival in port or anchorage to the different authorities, which could be cross-med or semaphore, depending on the length of the boat. Again, they have to send a DMS, Déclaration Maritime de Santé, 72 hours before their arrival. And again, they are very strict on this. Then port, once they get in port, there is no quarantine. Crew and guests are able to move anywhere in France, even because the limitation in France have been lifted, so there is no limitation to move within the territory. to anchor outside in the south of France. Again, the big concern is the Posidonia. I recommend again to download the app Donia to make sure you don't go and anchor. And then, of course, depending on the length of the boat, it must be called the semaphore or the crossmed or the prema, and of course your agent, to make sure to have the right anchorage spot. There is no specific restriction for Schengen and boats arriving from Schengen ports to navigate in south of France. Also, the limit of 10 guests on board has been lifted. So now there is no limit of guests on board for a yacht in south of France. This is pretty much it for south of France. What is important? Sorry, the extra Schengen, the boats arriving from extra Schengen ports, they have to ask authorization to arrive in a French port. There is no problem. They will be subject to quarantine once they get in and tested once they get in south of France. Since at the moment, the touristic activities for people arriving from extra Schengen in France are forbidden, I recommend, if you have to embark guests extra Schengen passports, you cannot do it in south of France. You cannot arrive with extra Schengen passport in south of France. So I recommend you to do it in another country, unfortunately, as the authorities are not very strict if the boat is coming from a Schengen port. We had this case with a boat coming from Turkey, which stopped in Italy. So the authorities didn't really ask anything.
And this obviously is just the same for Croatia as well.
It's the same for Croatia, yes, correct. So for what concerns the circulation of crew and guests in France, again, anyone arriving from a Schengen area is welcome in France, as the Prime Minister says, is welcome in France, I would say from Schengen area, and from Norway, Iceland, Swiss, and Liechtenstein are welcome in France. We have to take in consideration that France applied the reciprocity, let's say, principle. So with Spain and UK, the citizens from Spain and UK arriving in France are invited, the law says, are invited to do quarantine, which is not compulsory, it's an invitation to do quarantine. So I guess it can be avoided, but this is what the Prime Minister says. This is for Schengen. Another important notice: any visa Schengen was supposed to expire between the 16th of March and the 15th of June is automatically renewed for 180 days. And the South African crew arriving in south of France need to fly through UK to be able to get in south of France. And that's it, no quarantine for anyone from Schengen. For people arriving from extra Schengen with extra Schengen passports, basically the people arriving from extra Schengen are allowed to get in France only for very serious reasons still. So just for work or for a familiar reason, or for, very serious reasons. So tourism for people from outside EU or Schengen area is not allowed yet. This is valid until the 1st of July. Now, the French Prime Minister says after the 1st of July, they will start progressively to reopen borders. There is not a list yet of countries for which these borders will be reopened. So we are not sure yet how this progressively will mean, what it will mean. And this is pretty much it. There is no restriction of moving inside France to arriving by plane or by car or by motorbike or bus, whatever it is, from anywhere in EU. And I guess this is it for south of France.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lorenzo. Thanks. That was a really thorough update. And I think there's definitely a lot of things for obviously different boats, depending on where they're coming from, and obviously crew to think about. So yeah, if anyone's unsure, obviously definitely get in touch with Lorenzo. We'll share your details in the chat as well. So brilliant. So I think next on our agenda, we have A1 Yachting. So Rosemary, thank you for joining us. And I hope, you've been keeping well during the coronavirus period. I know a lot's been changing in Greece recently. So I know you've got a lot of updates for us.
Yes, indeed. Well, we did very well during the coronavirus. We've done probably the best in Europe, I would say. We've had very limited, we had a lockdown very early on, which was to protect the islands, and they're still protecting the islands. They locked down very early because they know that our health system, especially on the islands, is not great, and it could not deal with huge amounts of coronavirus. So they're still protecting the islands at the moment, which is a bit of an issue. Currently, yachts can come into Greece from Monday. They've been allowed to come into Greece, but they can only go to the mainland, and they can only come in with crew at the moment. Unfortunately, things are being led by the epidemiologists, not by ministers or people that really understand our business. So they're very slow, they're very late in informing us about new measures going to be brought in. So at the moment, most yachts can come in. They cannot come in from Turkey or Albania at the moment, and they can go to the mainland. We're expecting, the Prime Minister was on the television a few days ago, and he said that Greece will be open from 1st of July. At the moment, hotels that are open year-round are open, have opened again. They opened a few weeks ago. We aren't currently accepting many flights. Most of them, they're all going to either Athens or Thessalonica, and none to the islands directly. You can change in Athens, but that is going to change on the 1st of July, and we are expecting, that it hasn't been announced yet, that then people will be able to join yachts. Then a huge number of flights will be allowed to go directly to islands, and things will open up. And on the 1st of July, also islands, hotels that are open just for the tourist period will open. So it is expected that that is sort of the magic date, though we don't have any official word on that yet for yachts. At the moment, when people come in, they are tested, crew are tested, and they are quarantined for 7 days if the test is positive, and they're quarantined for 14 days if the test is negative. We've heard, I mean, things are moving very fast, and we have to wait for laws to come in. It's been very frustrating. We've heard that this will change very soon. So like Jan said, really people will have to get in touch with us and see what the latest information is, because we don't get information, we don't get any indication ahead of time. They tend to be last moment, and then suddenly things have changed. We haven't known beforehand. We have heard that there will not be the testing and the quarantine periods continuing, and they expect from the 1st of July random tests on people who will have to quarantine if they're positive only. But again, that has not been issued in the law so far. So, I mean, things are opening up, things are beginning to, because we do have some yachts that have arrived. It was only Monday when we opened to allow people, yachts with crew in. So we're just waiting really for the moment. We are in constant contact with the ministries. they're pretty sick of us because we're asking all the time for more information and asking questions so that we can give people more an update. We don't really have more than that. The other issue that I thought would be useful to mention, other than coronavirus, is VAT. A law was brought in, a new law was brought in, I mean, most of Europe, changing the VAT rules for charter, and our VAT was supposed to go up to 24%, and it was going to be incredibly complicated. But they've gone back to the old regime. They were also going to, for the first time, collect VAT from visiting yachts that embark and disembark outside Greece, which they've never done before. That was going to be, that was in the new law, but it has been postponed, been put on hold. So VAT has gone back to either 12 or 9.6% for this season. And yachts, we have been assured, we haven't, because the law was suspended, it isn't in writing in law that they will not collect VAT from visiting yachts, but we have been given it on by the ministry orally. We're trying to get it in writing, but it seems like they're going back to the previous position, which was not to collect VAT from visiting yachts, and the 12% or 9.6%. And the last thing I would say is those that don't want to embark or disembark outside Greece, charter licenses are much more possible than most people imagine. And we've obtained a good number of them. And it doesn't take all that long. It takes about, when we've got all the paperwork, it takes about 1.5 to 2 weeks. So it's fairly easy. Well, not easy, but it's fairly quick to do. And for the moment, that's more or less, I mean, again, I would agree with everybody else. People should contact us, and on a case by case, things change on almost a daily basis, unfortunately. And so that is more or less what we know at the moment.
Brilliant.
What is it?
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely sounding like a lot's changing, and I think, as you say, I think it's best for crew to get in touch to get a case-by-case sort of analysis and advice from you. So what I'll do, if it's okay with you, I will just share your email address in the chat so people can reach out to you directly.
If they want to. Yep.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
I've just shared that. So thank you very much, Rosemary. I think that was really useful. I'll move on to John Ross. John, you're joining us from Malta.
Okay, so the general synopsis for Malta is that most restrictions locally have now been lifted. Local cruising is allowed. Hotels, restaurants, bars, etc. are open. People are back to work. There is still quite strict social distancing, especially in shops, restaurants. It's compulsory to wear a mask in shops, etc. Schools are shut until September, although we expect summer schools to open next month. We've had very few cases over the last few weeks, in single digits, but we're a very small population, so you need to multiply these figures by 100 to compare with France, Italy, UK, etc. So we've had a total of 663 cases. Currently, today, 44 active cases with 610 recovered and 9 deaths, mostly in the over 80s and a couple of younger people with serious health conditions. About a quarter of the population has been tested. 20% of the cases are imported before shutdown, and the rest has been community spread. All passenger travel to and from Malta by sea, by air, has been banned since March. There was an early shutdown here as well. We are expecting from the 1st of July that people may travel directly between Malta and some safe corridor countries, which are mostly which are European Union countries, but not all of them. There's quite a few missing. That's on the slide if you've got that handy.
Okay. So I'll just put myself on the speaker view, and then right, so you should be able to do that now.
Okay, so the countries in bold are the ones with Mediterranean borders. See, there's some major ones missing from this list. Turkey, Tunisia, where a lot of yachts go for fuel from Malta. Also, transit countries like the UK, Holland, etc., are not on there. Italy, Spain, and France were added to this list this week, but with some exemptions. Now, most of these places do not have a coastline, except for Catalonia and Spain, which is obviously the Barcelona area. So you could not come directly from Barcelona to Malta. And also, if you're transiting through Madrid, you would need to Madrid, Milan, Turin. You would need to make sure that you would actually be allowed into Malta, and you would probably have to quarantine. You will be asked on arrival if you have spent the previous 4 weeks in one of these safe countries and not been to any other country. And if you answer no to that question, you will have a mandatory 2-week quarantine, and that is strictly enforced by the police with 3,000 to 10,000 euros per day fine if you are caught breaking the quarantine. The latest rules say exemptions may be granted for people to travel to or from countries other than those listed, where it's necessary or essential. But we are not sure yet whether that's going to apply to crew changes, surveyors, etc. So that's starting on the 1st of July. Then we expect from the 15th of July that all these restrictions will be removed, and then you'll be able to travel here from anywhere in the world. And that obviously applies to yachts arriving and leaving as well. For the last 2 weeks, the Superintendent of Public Health has allowed transiting yachts with only crew to enter Malta for refueling, repairs, servicing, flagging, customs procedures, and other ancillary necessities, whatever they are. To date, as in today, all the yachts that have arrived in the last 2 weeks have had to quarantine for 2 weeks. And again, that's very strictly enforced. We expect that to continue until at least the 1st of July, and possibly another 2 weeks after that for high-risk countries or high-risk regions. Surveys, the UK, MCA, and Transport Malta, and most other flag states have put arrangements in place to extend statutory survey windows initially by 3 months and possibly longer depending on how things develop. Some countries like Malta require remote survey, other countries it's just a simple application. So the vast majority of yachts should be able to work the rest of this season, even if they haven't managed to complete their annual surveys in the spring. And that's all I have for you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, John. I'll just stop sharing that right now. Return us to our normal grid view. Thank you so much for that update. John, are you happy for us to share your email address in our chat for anyone who wants to ask a specific question on Malta?
Yeah, that's fine. Email's the best way.
Perfect. Okay, I'll share that shortly. But what I will do is I will just hand over to De Felice Yachting, who are based in Viareggio in Italy. We've got Ida from De Felice. How are you doing, Ida?
And Carmine. My name is Carmine. Yes, here's the brother.
Oh, hi guys. Sorry, I know you didn't join in the beginnings, but it's good to have you here now. What I will do, I don't know if you want to start with a general update, but I think it would be good if you could just tell us a little bit about an update just with regards to a lot of the COVID-19 restrictions that were in Italy, and obviously a lot of the health and safety measures. Do you have any specific updates relating to that?
Yeah.
Or I'm sure you've got a whole list of regulations you ready to share.
Okay, at the moment our situation is very, very similar to the French situation. The regulation is changing week by week, and so what I say now probably next Monday can be changed. So okay, at the moment, in this moment, all the ships are welcome, or the yachts, sorry, are welcome in Italy if are coming from EU countries or Schengen area. And the only clearances that has required more than the normal formalities required are the health-free practice that should be required to the Italian health authority at least 24 hours before the arrival of the yacht in an Italian port. Is just a procedure. Nobody will come on board. Nobody will check. There is a checklist where the captain have to declare that the health on board is well. Nobody has COVID and things like that. Different is for the yacht coming from outside of Schengen area and EU countries, because in this situation quarantine is required. Quarantine can be done on board of the yacht and cannot be avoided by the test, the COVID test, because it's not provided by the law. So even if we make the COVID and the COVID test is negative, quarantine must be done on board. And so even in these situations too, the free practice, the health free practice must be required at least 24 hours before the arrival, and a special information must be sent to the Italian health authority in order to start with the health surveillance by the Italian health authorities, and the voluntary isolation, the quarantine. Except for this, if in Italy the yacht can cruise with inside along the Italian coast without any restriction. Just they have just to make the standard clearances if commercial, otherwise the formalities required for pleasure yacht, but no more. If seamen, crew members must join the yacht if they are coming from outside of EU or Schengen area. An invitation letter must be, even if there is not, even if Schengen visa is not required, but an invitation letter must be provided by the captain or by the owner. And the only reason they are accepted is for exceptional working reason. So there is the possibility that at the airport can refuse the authorization to come in Italy. When arrive in Italy, they must have 14 days of quarantine. It's suggested to do in an apartment, not on board, because otherwise, if they pass on board, the captain must assume under his responsibility that this person has not any contact with anybody on board. So this person must be closed in his room and stay there for 2 weeks. And so all the crew members must pass the quarantine. This is more or less the situation in Italy. we suggest before, as in Italy, we have a part of the regulation issued by the region. We suggest before to came in a port to contact the ship agent in that port, because the regulation can change from Viareggio to Naples to Venice to Genova. This is because Tuscany governor has issued a different regulation from Liguria governor and from Naples governor. So the best way is to contact an agent and ask the exact procedure for any port. And
for the crew member, the crew member, the guest can visit Italy, but they have to respect the distance at least of 1 meter.
Suggested 1.8 meters, and
otherwise mask and gloves. And the restaurant, shops, all commercials, all the shops are opened, but inside you have to wear the mask and the gloves.
And maybe the access is contingentato. Not everybody can enter, but just a number of person each time. So 5 persons for each time. Then they wait that exit other person. This is in order to avoid too much person in the same area.
In the same time. So they suggest to book the entering in the shop or in the restaurant, because the situation in Italy is still strict.
Yes.
And
yes.
People is afraid, and so we suggested to have all to take with them the kit with the masks and gloves, because it's possible to have some argument with other people or not entering in shops.
A part of the government offices are still working in smart working, so the clearances can be more slow. So we suggest if to consider that in this moment we can have problem to issue some authorization and to have a response by the authorities, because a part of the officers is still working from home.
Another thing that the crew member can rent a car, but it's possible to use the car with only 3 people inside. The driver and the back seat, two people
with the mask.
Okay, I think this is
should be, yes, the most important.
Thank you so much. I think it's definitely interesting to hear that a lot of the regulations with regards to masks and the amount of people that can go in a restaurant or a shop is still quite strict in Italy. So I think, those are definitely important points that you've pointed out. And then the other thing I just wanted to pick up on that you said was, it sounds like, it's the same in Italy as in other countries, where the different regions in Italy have slightly different rules and regulations. So for crew obviously wanting to go from between regions or to a specific region it might be better to contact someone local in that region to get the specific regulations. I mean, I guess that's the same for Sardinia as well. The regulations might be slightly different there. Is that right?
Yes, yes. In
Absolutely.
Sardinia, you should register and
Absolutely.
under a website, and before to enter in Sardinia, otherwise they don't accept the arrival. Yes, it is very different from region to region.
Okay, perfect.
The main
Sorry.
thing is to contact the maritime authority or ship agents because it's possible to have to get fine for wrong or wrong way to enter in the port or other things. So it's important to contact before entering 24 before
At least 24 hours before, yes.
the coming, because the master have the possibility to arrange the formalities in order to enter and to moor. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think, yep, that's definitely really useful. And obviously just for all of our attendees watching today, so you guys are based in Viareggio. So if anyone wants to go to your region, obviously you'd be the best people to get in touch with. Are there any other regions that you deal with, or do you specialize in the Viareggio region?
No, Tuscany and Liguria.
Okay. Yes, we can assist.
Liguria.
Because we have an office in Viareggio, the head office, and two offices, one in Livorno, Leghorn, and one in La Spezia.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that update? No, perfect. Well, what we'll do, thank you so much. And what we'll do is we'll share your email address, which is training@defelice.yachts with the chat, if that's okay.
Okay.
So I'll just add that right now.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Brilliant. So just, I guess we're just moving on to our final part of the webinar. So that's just onto our questions. I'm just going through our chat now. We haven't received a very large amount of questions. The one question, and maybe Jan, you can answer this question. And this, I think maybe this is a question that I guess applies to everyone, but I think someone's asked Chair, if their boat is based in Spain, so if your boat is based in a certain country, but you've got another flag. So here, our boat is based in Spain, but it's UK flagged. Is it considered Schengen or not Schengen? And obviously with the,
but in which sense? I'm not sure I understand the question.
So I think the sense is a lot of countries are only allowing or not allowing vessels from non-Schengen areas.
Most of the country are putting restriction depending on where the boats come from. So if it's, I mean, no matter the flag, if the boat come from Spain, or it depends on the country of origin. So basically that's why if it's really just considering about if the boat can be allowed in a country or not, I mean, it depends where it has been before. I mean, the flag, if tomorrow it's a Taiwanese flag, but in Spain, is not going to be considered as an Asiatic boat. It's.
And I guess this is why a lot of people, you've obviously recommended, if you are going to try and come to a country that's got a certain amount of, safe countries like Malta, you'd have to transit through a country that you're allowed to go to first, and then move on to the country that's allowing boats from that region.
So
sorry. In Italy, we usually ask in a list of the 10 ports before touched before the last port. So if they came from Malta, but just a little before they was in Turkey, we consider that is coming from outside the EU.
Okay, so I think that's a really important point to make, and I think specific to that question is, I think if you are coming from a country that's maybe not on a list of entry countries, say for example if you're trying to get to Italy and your boat's not coming from one of the verified countries, I think the best thing to do obviously is to get in touch with the local agent, because I think you wouldn't want to chance by going, thinking that you're allowed because you've stopped over in France or something like that. So I guess that's the biggest answer to that question.
I see a question for Tunisia as well. I mean, from Angela Wallace. I guess that she's looking to get the port cleared in Tunisia in order to get the exportation out of EU. So just to let you know, I've got the latest information for Tunisia. So Tunisia borders will be open on 27th of June. Yachts are allowed to enter Tunisian marinas for touch and go, for short stay, to bunker and to get provision. Crew guests and owners are not allowed to go on shore for the time being. Before the 27th of June, Tunisian government will give more details about procedure, process related, and crew guests going on shore if quarantine will be removed or not. So if I may suggest to Angela, we've got an office in Tunisia. So if she wants to get the updates, I don't know when it's going to be the exportation, but after the 27th of June, we can send her the latest information. So you can share my email and I'll put her in touch with our office, BW office in Tunisia.
Brilliant. And I can see another question just came through from Angela, and I don't know if that's very related, but I'll just read that question out. So if crew have a passport from a country that is not on the entry list, but have been on board the yacht during the quarantine time, how would that work? So I guess it's how would that crew member be classified?
This is actually a question I've posed today to our government because I don't understand from what they've written, whether it's where you're coming from or whether it's your passport. So we have asked the question to be clarified.
I mean, based on what everyone's saying, it sounds like a lot of the general rule for a lot of countries is where the boat's been based and not, so for example, like you said, it's not the flag of the boat, but it's where the boat's been based. Then I would imagine the rule would apply for the crew member, but at the same time, I think it works differently, and I think it might be a country by country basis, and it would probably be better to be safe, rather safe than sorry, but contact
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's the idea. I mean, that's why the question, sorry, I made a mistake before because I thought it was Angela asking for Tunisia. So yeah, the question of Angela, we need more information. I mean, where the country is based, the crew, which is the nationality and everything, just to be sure we give the exact information, because sometimes also we have experienced the fact that there is a lot of information that are just oral information from the authorities, and we don't want to provide any false information or information that can be misinterpreted if they don't have any written information from these authorities, or if we don't understand exactly the whole situation of a crew of a boat or of a guest. I mean, every case, as I was saying at the beginning of the webinar, every case is very different. So I'll invite Angela to email either one of the panelists of the country she's interested in, or email me, and we will take care of it.
Definitely. I think it's definitely worth keeping that in mind. And obviously, like Ida said, in Italy, each region has slightly different rules. So it's better to be safe than sorry, and actually email an agent in the port that you're going to with your specific, what's your passport and where you're coming from. And I think the advice can be given based on that information. Just to move on, I can see there's a question for Lorenzo. I don't know if Lorenzo, you've seen that question. So
yeah, I was just close. Yeah, sorry. Thank you very much to Anna, who is asking if you charter guests coming to France, you have to show they've been during the last 14 days. No, they don't. The authorities is not asking the list of where you have been in the last 14 days now. If you're coming from a EU country or Schengen country, they assume that you are okay, let's say. So no, they can easily go and have their charter and enjoy their charter.
Brilliant, thank you. I don't know if there's any sort of last points that any of the panelists want to make before we round up. No, we're all good?
Not really, no, we're all good.
Perfect.
I think the only point I'd like to make is a lot of things are changing and we're expecting the 1st of July because a lot of countries are going to have the rules change, and hopefully in a positive way. So, I mean, do not hesitate to contact any of your local contacts for an update from the 1st of July specifically, because that's where we hope we're going to finally start a season and get back to some kind of normality.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jan. Sorry, Rosemary, did you want
Yeah,
to?
I'm agreeing with Jan. Sorry.
Brilliant. Yeah, so yeah, I think if anyone's got any specific questions, obviously please contact one of our panelists who we've added all their email addresses in the chat. And I think, you know, just to echo, it's obviously rather safe, better to be safe than sorry. If you've got a unique situation, definitely reach out, get your travel plans confirmed, at least for the time being, because I think whilst everything's starting to open, it doesn't look like we're fully open yet. So it's definitely better to get, you know, get your travel itinerary approved before making any moves.